Facebook apologies aren't enough. The whole internet needs a privacy overhaul. When members of Congress grilled Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg for failing to safeguard consumers' personal data, we heard questions about how the breach could have occurred and what steps Facebook was taking to protect its users' privacy. Zuckerberg repeatedly apologized and promised Facebook would do better going forward. But Facebook has been apologizing for the past 14 years for its flagrant lapses in protecting user privacy. And Facebook isn't the only bad actor. This is not a company-specific problem, it's an industry-wide problem. In the past year alone, major companies like Equifax and Orbitz have experienced data breaches jeopardizing the highly sensitive data of millions of Americans. The app company Grindr has come under fire for sharing the HIV status of its users without their consent. Our current privacy framework no longer works. More, you are not friends with Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. You are their product. More, delete Facebook. No thanks. But we'd all be happier if we used it less. While the hearings this month offered little in terms of solutions, they did put a spotlight on a problem that's been glaringly obvious for years. Consumers have little control over their data online. Zuckerberg repeated time and again that his company gives its users control over how they want to share their data on the platform. But user control needs to go far beyond letting people choose who sees their posts. Facebook's business model is based on collecting as much data on its users as possible. It generates revenue by sharing relevant data points on its users with advertisers for targeted advertising. Facebook also grants third-party developers access to its users without meaningful consent. As revealed by the Cambridge Analytica scandal, in which the company scraped the personal information of 87 million Facebook users without their consent, third parties can sell or manipulate this data in ways consumers never intended or imagined. Facebook also has tools to track its users across different devices even when they are logged off the site. Again, Facebook isn't the only one doing this. Large platforms, internet service providers and other websites are all engaged in data collection practices, many of which happen without user consent. Any solutions must involve all of them. To be sure, data is useful for companies to develop better services for consumers. But the lack of consumer control over data poses serious threats to our democracy. Companies can easily manipulate data to politically motivate voters or to engage in discriminatory practices like predatory lending. Strong privacy laws that give consumers meaningful notice and the choice to opt into data collection prevent this from happening. Sadly, the current legal framework is wholly inadequate to protect consumer privacy in the digital age. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, adopted good broadband privacy rules in 2016, requiring Internet Service Providers, ISPs, to get opt-in consent prior to sharing their customers' sensitive information with third parties. These Internet privacy rules would have been the strongest we've had to date. Unfortunately, Congress repealed them last year before they took effect. This giant step backward isn't surprising when we consider the uninformed questions that so many members of Congress brought to the Zuckerberg hearings. It was embarrassing. More, to battle fake news and trolls, we need more sunlight on our social media policing the USA, a look at race, justice, media. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, is tasked with protecting consumer privacy, but its authority is severely limited and it lacks both the power and the expertise to do a decent job. The agency has no power to adopt privacy rules, and it can only take enforcement actions if it determines, after the fact, that a company has engaged in an unfair or deceptive practice. In the privacy context, this usually means the agency can only take actions way after a company violates its privacy policy. But even under an FTC consent decree from 2011, Facebook has still failed to protect its users' privacy. Just as bad, FTC official Bruce Hoffman said this month that there's no reason to think consumers care much about their personal information. We can only wonder who they have been talking to. We need a privacy framework that gives consumers control over their own data. Companies across the board must be required to get express consent from their users prior to sharing their data. I have pressed for this kind of opt-in policy for years. At the outset, consumers should be asked to respond to a simple statement that they do or do not want their personal data shared. And this choice should appear before those ridiculous terms of service agreements that few people read and almost none could understand even if they did read them. Companies should also provide clear notice about what data they are collecting and how it will be used. Congress should look to elements of Europe's General Data Protection Regulation that include strong opt-in requirements as a guiding principle. For years, companies have failed to adequately protect our personal data, and our weak privacy laws have paved the way for this to happen. It's high time to put consumer privacy ahead of corporate greed. Michael Copps, a member of the Federal Communications Commission from 2001 to 2011, is a special advisor for Common Cause. Follow him on Twitter, @Copsom.